correspondent Edward R. Murrow reported that the people of Britain felt the machine is out of control, that we are all passengers on an express train travelling at high speed through a dark tunnel toward an unknown destiny. The suspicion recurs that the train may have no engineer, no one who can handle it. Hitler, meanwhile, had no doubts about where he was heading. His forces had taken full advantage of the inertia of Britain and France, knifing through Poland the previous autumn, then in April invading Denmark and routing the British Army and Royal Navy from Norway. German troops were now poised to launch a lightning sweep through the heart of Western Europe, striking toward the English Channel. Socially and militarily, Britain teetered on the edge of disaster. Yet there appeared to be little hope for change. Chamberlain was determined to stay in power, and most of the massive Tory majority in the House of Commons seemed determined to support him. So were the BBC and the nation's newspapers. Such support was in the national interest, editors rationalized. Criticizing the government in time of war would be disloyal, they declared, splitting the country further and only helping the Germans. This, then, was what the Tory insurgents faced as they plotted to oust Neville Chamberlain. It was the climax of a 2-year struggle against his policy of appeasement of Nazi Germany that had begun with the resignation of Anthony Eden as Foreign Secretary in February 1938. The fight had been bitter and intensely personal. The rebels were challenging men who had been their comrades in school, who belonged to the same clubs, who in some cases were members of their own families. They were violating the gentlemanly norms of their society. For that, they were vilified as traitors to their party, government, class, and country. Among the rebels themselves, there were deep divisions and dissension. They had trouble finding a leader. Only after the war had begun did a senior colleague finally step forward with the courage and conviction to head the revolt. That leader was not Winston Churchill. Indeed, the Tory dissidents had been given no help at all by the man who once had been the foremost critic of Chamberlain's appeasement policy. When war was declared, Churchill joined the cabinet as First Lord of the Admiralty. In the months that followed, although he pressed hard in government councils for a more vigorous prosecution of the war, he remained loyal to the Prime Minister. To the dismay of his anti-appeasement colleagues, Churchill made clear he would do nothing to help bring Chamberlain down. If the Prime Minister was to be toppled, it must be their doing, not his. The climax of the anti-Chamberlain movement would come on a soft, golden spring afternoon in early May, when members of the House of Commons gathered to debate Britain's humiliating defeat in Norway. It was the final showdown between the Prime Minister and the Tory rebels, joined by their newfound Labour, Liberal and Independent allies. As they worked feverishly before the debate to line up last-minute support, the rebels knew that the odds of their succeeding were regarded as slim to none. According to Time magazine, nobody thought on that first afternoon of debate that there was more than an outside chance of dislodging Chamberlain. Yet 3 days later, Neville Chamberlain was gone, and Winston Churchill was Prime Minister. This is the story of how that came to be, and the men who made it happen. The idea for Troublesome Young Men grew out of research for 2 previous books that I wrote with my husband Stanley Cloud, both of them touching on the climactic summer of 1940 in Britain. It was during those terrible yet glorious days that the epic of Winston Churchill really began. "You ask, what is our aim?" he declared to the House of Commons on May 13, 3 days after replacing Chamberlain. "I can answer in one word: victory." That word remained his touchstone, even as France fell. British troops retreated to Dunkirk, and a German invasion of Britain seemed to loom on the horizon. When Luftwaffe bombers began their assault on Britain later that summer, the new Prime Minister rallied his countrymen to greatness. The story of Winston Churchill in 1940 is without question one of the most compelling dramas in modern British history. But as I researched the period in more detail, it seemed to me that the behind-the-scenes story leading to Churchill's accession, that of the Tory rebels defying their party and Prime Minister, is, in its way, no less significant or engrossing. For if it